From Ashburn, Virginia, this is the U.S. Senate for Virginia Republican Candidate Forum. Brought to you by the Loudoun County Republican Committee. Your candidates are Eddie Garcia, Jonathan Emord, Scott Parkinson, Hung Cao, and Chuck Smith. Moderated by WMAL Radio's Larry O'Connor.
Hello, good evening. How are you? It's so nice to see people later than 7 in the morning. This is fantastic. I thought we were trying to get away from the whole country club Republican thing, but just gonna steer into that swerve. That's all right. I'm happy. Look at this. It's gorgeous. It's beautiful. Who doesn't want to be a country club Republican? Right? When Scott was talking about the silent auction and the jewelry over there, I got worried because he said for your wife or for your mother. I've been to a Democrat event before, and when they have to go through the list are eligible to wear women's jewelry, it gets really, really long list. Or if they're just addressing whoever Bill Clinton happens to be dating at the moment, it could be like your wife or your, whoever you met on Jeffrey Epstein, Really? Too soon? He didn't kill himself. My goal tonight is to keep things moving, to not get in the way of the candidates, and more importantly, to not get in the... Because this is actually about you, not about the candidates. This is about voters. This is about Republicans choosing who's going to represent us in a very vital race to finally end Tim Kaine's tyranny as a senator from the Commonwealth of Virginia. Quote his very strong pro-life stand when he ran for senator the first time, but I think he's erased it from the internet. But, he's changed quite a bit, hasn't he, that Tim Kaine? My goal is to not get in their way, not get in the candidates' way, make sure that you've got a clear understanding of those candidates. It's one of the roles at WMAL. We're Switzerland when it's primary time. We don't presume to tell you who the better Republican is. You're the Republicans. You're the ones who make that final decision. Remember back in 2016 when all the smart Republicans told you who you should and shouldn't nominate for president? Yeah, we don't play. So we have been honored to be able to be a forum for all of the candidates where we can give them equal time, ask them tough, fair questions, and not questions that are meant to have them destroy each other the way the mainstream media does with Republican candidates. So that's my other goal tonight, is to tell jokes right up to the edge where I won't get in trouble and it won't haunt them in the general election. So we'll delete that whole Bill Clinton part, right? Get it out of the... All right. Without any further ado, I would like to welcome to the stage your candidates for the Republican nomination for Senate. We begin with Hung Cao. Scott Parkinson. Jonathan Emord. Eddie Garcia. Dramatic walk-on from the back of the room. And Mr. Chuck Smith. My fellow Republicans, your for the Republican nomination for the United States Senate. Gentlemen, go ahead and have a seat. By the way, the last debate that I moderated for statewide office in Virginia was in 2021, and it was when we Republicans nominee for governor would be. And I'm not saying I'm a good luck charm, but it was a good night for Glenn Youngkin. It ended up being a good night for Virginia and for our party, and now I'm the wine ambassador to Virginia's wine country. So I will expect something. Gentlemen, what we're going to do with our questions tonight, and again, they're geared for these voters to know who you are, what your approach will be to the race as well as to the office should you win the race. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to begin right here, so lucky seat, and we're going to with each question, and then the second question, sir, we'll start with Mr. Emord, and then we'll move down and snake around, almost like a fantasy football draft. That was a test, and they know what I'm talking about, so they're all kind of cool and nerdy. All right. So we will begin now. Our first question is more of a so this one is 1.5 minutes, and you do have a clock right in front of you where Scott is sitting. I'm not going to be I don't want to say, stop, stop, stop. I don't want to be Chris Wallace, all right? So our first question, and we'll begin with you, Mr. Garcia. Tell us about your strengths that will help you win this election and you from your opponents.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Eddie Garcia. I'm running here for the United States Senate, and thank you all for attending. I'm blessed to be able to introduce myself to you. I'm the son of a ranch hand. I'm originally from South Texas, from a small country town. I come from working people, and I've joined the U.S. Army when I was 17 years old. I've served all across the globe. I got 6 combat deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. I finished my career in the Pentagon working with the House and the Senate and on federal policy for our veterans and our military. It comes from us, and I think my strength is just that. I have a blue-collar, bottoms-up, working-class background. If we're going to win across Virginia, we got to have a candidate that can unite the party, that can unite the farmers and ranchers in the valley and the southwest and south side. We got to have a candidate that can win veterans. I'm a 22-year Army veteran with 6 deployments. Have a candidate that can speak to younger people. I've been endorsed by the Virginia College Republicans right here because I'm making the next generation of conservative voters a priority in this election. We got to have a party for what I call new Americans, people who have come here the right way, that are tired of seeing their border destroyed, that are tired of seeing their government away to people overseas and south of the border, people that are getting rich off the backs of working people. There's going to be a lot of differences here tonight. One of the differences that sets me apart, I believe, is I don't come from this Washington class. I'm a servant of the nation. I'm not some D.C. lawyer or hotshot. I don't have some highfalutin degree from some Ivy League school. From you, the same communities and backgrounds that many of you have come from. I ask you to support me in this because when we do, I'm going to be working for you. The secret to Washington, D.C. is that the people who elect you, the people who get you in office are the people you work for. So when big money and out of state get you elected, when the political endorsements from Washington, D.C. get you elected, you work for them. But when you get me elected, I'm going to be working for you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. And thank you for your service, sir. We move on to Mr. Emord.
Yes, thank you so much for being. This is a great opportunity for us, and we appreciate all of you being here. You know, I've been a constitutional lawyer for the last 38 years, and I came into Washington during the Reagan administration when I was 28 years old. The difference is that I've been litigating for your rights my entire professional career, fighting the federal government. I didn't worked against the government whenever it violated your rights. I have the record for defeating, thank you, I have the record for defeating the Food and Drug Administration 8 times in federal court on constitutional grounds. I understand the administrative state. It makes 3/4 of all federal law, and you really have to understand it if you're going to save our nation, because from implementing the whole border initiative to the whole climate change initiative to every aspect of this massive government movement to take away our rights. And believe me, we are in the last days of our constitutional republic unless we fundamentally change the direction of our nation. In this election to do it. This is one of our last opportunities, if not the last. And if we win this election, and I ask all of you to join me in this fight, if we win this election, we will be able to save our nation for our children and our children's children, to ensure the survival and success of liberty. That sacred fire of liberty that was given to us by George Washington, with the request that we keep it lit, generation after generation. This is our opportunity to do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Emord. And Mr. Parkinson.
Well, I want to start out by thanking you for coming out here tonight. It's a beautiful evening, And it means a lot when we have all the frontliners in our community that are willing to show up and offer support to all 5 of the candidates today. I also want to thank Scott. You know, he offered that prayer for the mother-in-laws at home watching the little kids. My wife is with me, Cortland. We've got 4 little kids. My mother-in-law is watching all them. So grateful for those prayers. She needs them. So I'm Scott Parkinson. I'm running for the United States Senate because I think it's time to finally fire Tim Kaine. He has been in elected office for 30 years. He's been on the ballot 9 times, and he actually Sanders 94% of the time. I don't think that Virginia can afford 94% of socialism. And this race is going to come down to the cost of living in the economy, public safety and the illegal immigration invasion on our southern border, and the parents' rights movement. I mentioned those 4 little kids, 13, 2 years old. What they did to our kids during COVID, we need more parents that are willing to stand up and fight back against these radical institutions, whether they're the schools and universities or whether they are just the bullies that are in these progressive communities that are coming after our children. Be a voice for those families. We need fighters in Washington. I've worked for 3 United States senators. I've been a senior staffer in the House. I'm looking forward to sharing more with you tonight. Thank you all so much for having us.
Thank you, Mr. Parkinson. And Mr. Cow.
Hello, Loudoun County. For putting this together. Thank you for inviting such a smart and intelligent and handsome man to moderate this tonight. You guys know me. You know, we did something very amazing in 2022. We moved the 10th district 13%. This is where Joe Biden won by 19 points and we lost by 6. So that's because of you. That's because of all you. So what we need to do is build on that and move forward. Tim Kaine knows he's vulnerable. He's vulnerable against me. That's why he's been coming after me since 12 hours after I declared my candidacy, because he knows when you contrast me with him, it's very evident. Gotten a government paycheck for 30 years, except he's got millions to show for it, and all I have is scars. Who do you think fought for this country? Who do you think put their lives on the line? I know what it's going to be like. I know they're going to come after me hard. They've already done it. They've hired people to write nasty articles, lies about. But April and I are ready for this. We knew this. This is our act of love for you because we love this country so much, and we're not going to let it go down. Ladies and gentlemen, we can do this year. You have the right candidate in front of you right now that can beat Tim Kaine because he's very vulnerable against me. My name's Hung Kao. I'm your next U.S. Senator. Thank you.
And Mr. Smith.
Thank you so much. So many smiling faces. Thank you all for coming. Tim Kaine is going to be beaten by the word only. But just before that, we need to consider that the next United States Senate has faith in God, faith in principles. And this is my message. I believe in America. I believe in the founding fathers. I believe in God Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, and Jesus Christ, his only Son, our Lord. I believe in we the people of the United States of America in order to form, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility. It is precisely because I believe that you can count on me to stand for America, stand for Virginia, and by the grace of God, come hell or high water, no matter what, stand and endorse Donald J. Trump as the next president of the United States of America and never let him down. Only, I'm an only child. Doesn't stop there. I'm the only Marine in this race. I'm the only Navy JAG commander in this race. I'm the only guy born on the 4th of July. I'm the only former chairman of the Republican Party in Virginia Beach. I am the only candidate in this race. Practice federal law, state law, Iowa law, Virginia law, military law, and the hottest single button political issue in the United States of Virginia today, immigration. I'm the only candidate who can say I'm articulate, bilingual, charismatic, dynamic, energetic, faithful, loyal, good-looking, inspirational, intelligent. Did I mention good-looking? Thank you all. God bless you. God save America. Thank you.
And away we go. So we'll now go into the formal questions on issues. And for each of these questions, each candidate will have 2 minutes. bear in mind in your answers, because we do want to know your positions, but we can also go to your website to see your positions. So if you can give life to your positions on these issues, if you're comfortable with it, framed within the context of the first thing that Virginians are going to want you to deliver, and that is a victory. It's not just about and what you stand for and what you'll do when you win. We need to know how your position on these issues will allow you to win and how you will take these issues to beat Tim Kaine. If you're comfortable, I think that would be really good for the voters to hear as well. So, we begin with our first issue-oriented question. He was asked, why do you rob banks? And he said, that's where the money is. Well, when you're trying to get votes in Virginia, why do you come to Loudoun County? Well, that's where the votes are, especially Republican votes. And if you're talking to Republicans from Loudoun County, we begin with education. As a U.S. Senator, beginning with what can you do from that position to help parents take back control of the schools they pay for and help direct their children into the education they deserve and away from the indoctrination they're getting?
Thank you very much for that very important question. You know, Tim Kaine is behind this woke agenda. This is from transitioning of youth to sexualization of children in preschool all the way through high school, and also, of course, with this whole agenda that is gender fluidity. And I'll tell you, this is a planned destruction of our kids. This is Marxism. This is cultural Marxism. Get back to the fundamentals here. What do we need to do? As your United States Senator, I will introduce legislation to make it a federal felony to aid or cause the transitioning of anyone under the age of 18. In addition, I will enforce the Equal Protection Clause. We will audit every institution, both in the military, to determine whether or not they're engaged in critical race theory. If they're engaged in critical race theory, we will cut off federal funding. The third thing that we will do, we will define as child abuse any sexualization of children when they are in the preschool and through grade school. We're not going to have the schools indoctrinating our kids with this. And then in addition to this, we are going to have true school choice. We are going to introduce federal legislation to allow you to take federal dollars and go to the school of your choice to get out of the public schools, because the public schools need competition, and this is the way to improve them. Through all of these means, we are going to take we're going to fulfill the promise that you and Loudoun County gave us, where you attacked the school board for its outrageous CRT indoctrination, and we are going to save our kids. There's nothing more important than ensuring that the next generation loves this country, knows why it's the greatest nation, appreciates that we're the last best hope for freedom on earth, and is willing to fight for this country and to ensure the survival and success of liberty here. Thank you very much.
All right, Jonathan Emord. Mr. Parkinson.
You know, when COVID hit, my oldest daughter was in 4th grade. It was 18th, March 2020. I'm sure most of you remember that evening. And kids are confused, right? They've got all these adults from schools telling them that they've got to wear masks, or that this disease might make them kill their grandparents or their teachers, their neighbors. They scared the crap out of kids. There's a real mental health crisis in Northern Virginia that continues today. I live in Arlington, Virginia, and I still travel all throughout our community, and I see little kids wearing masks on the soccer field. Who's going to stand up and tell these kids that it's okay to breathe the same air, to give each other hugs, and that any senior citizens? We got to be a voice for those kids. My daughter, when she was in 6th grade, she's still in public school. She wanted to get into private school. She got waitlisted. And one day I picked her up from school. She's got tears streaming down her face. And I said, what's wrong, sweetie? She says, Daddy, they don't let me sit next to him in the cafeteria anymore. And I said, why? And she said, everybody was talking about vaccinations. They know I'm not vaccinated, so they won't let me sit with them. And she's like, Dad, I just want to get the vaccine. And I said, I'm sorry. We don't think it's safe for you. You're not getting it. I don't think that that's a unique story to my family. And the reality is, we prayed about it, and she did get into private school the next year. We're at River. great Christian school. And I think that we've got to make sure that we've got school choice for all families. I strongly support the Arizona bill that provides for universal educational savings accounts. Universal ESAs, that's where the federal dollars follow the backpack, the parent, not the educational institution. I'll introduce that legislation in the United States Senate as well.
Thank you, Mr. Parkinson. Mr. Cow.
When I came to this country as a refugee, my parents taught me that they can take away your money, they can take away your position in life, what's in your head. So that's why education was so hard for us. They push it hard. And I went to Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology. It's the first graduating class. Do you know that that school was ranked #1 in the entire country? It dropped to #5, and just yesterday, the rankings came out. They're number 14 in the nation. That's what happens when you take away meritocracy. That's what happens when you take away people striving to be the best, and you replace it with equity. Look, you can call it whatever you want. Communism, Marxism, socialism, equity. It's the same thing. My wife and I, kids, because we want to make sure that they have the best opportunities possible. That's why our oldest right now is at the United States Naval Academy, and he's on the superintendent's list. Our church, Cornerstone Chapel, created Cornerstone Christian Academy for that whole purpose. Parents, a choice. We have to have the choice, and that money needs to follow the kids, because it's hard for our kids to have been homeschooled and not be able to do the activities that they would have been able to do at regular high schools. So it needs to follow kids. The money needs to follow them, and we need education. We can't have one size fits all. We need to have vocational schools. You know that Pell Grants can't pay for vocational schools. So we need to allow that we need to have universities adopt these vocational schools so that kids can graduate as ASC certified mechanics, FAA certified aviation mechanics, certified pipe fitters, so we can build America again. It starts with education. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Cow. Point of personal privilege, my daughter was on the soups list all 4 years. She was there. So, you got something to strive for, Mr. Smith.
So here's our children are being sent to school to learn English, science, biology, math, and instead they're being faced with wokeism, cancel culture, critical race theory. Donald Trump wants America to be great again. America cannot. Schools are not great. If our parents are not in control of these schools, if teachers and the administration stop listening to parents, as your United States Senator, I will withhold funding from that particular institution that does not put parents back in control of these schools. Here's the problem. Our children are being attacked. Our children are being assaulted. Our children are being raped. And the perpetrators get off scot-free. What's happening in Loudoun County, what has happened in Loudoun County will not happen anywhere else. Your United States Senator, I will remind schools that parents are in control, not principals. We send our kids not just to brick and mortar. We send them to schools to be taught. And by golly, that is exactly what we're going to do as your United States Senator. No more will parents have to worry schools. Our parents will no longer be arrested for speaking up to school boards. Our parents will no longer be talked down to by administration. These are our most precious resources, our children. And until our schools recognize that, they do not have the right funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Also, just so everyone knows that I'm being even-handed, my daughter is also dating a Marine. So, can't win them all. Yeah. Mr. Garcia.
I've pledged to introduce universal school choice is the only way out of this culture war zone. Our kids didn't sign up for it. We never asked for it. And as conservatives, you just heard a lot of anger up here. To the outside world, that's what it seems like, a lot of anger. We have to have a message that talks Universal school choice solves a lot of problems. We'll chase books and libraries. We'll chase boys and girls sports. We'll chase bathrooms. And we'll chase all the way to the ends of the earth, because there's no limit to where the radical left will go. The only path forward is universal school choice. What universal school choice does, thank you. Universal school choice does is it gets the power and the control, and most importantly, any federal dollar that is destined for that child's education, it goes to the parents, so that the parents have control over what, how, and where their children are educated in. It's the only path forward to solve these problems. We need a generation of families that learn together. Homeschooling is key into that future. We need families that are built around education, that are preparing their children for the future workforce that we're going to need in the trades, in the future technologies, in semiconductors and artificial intelligence and machine learning and all the years of the future. If we don't have an education system built for that, if we don't have policies, if we don't have people that can articulate this message to a group of people who are not diehard left or are not diehard right, but are somewhere in the middle, that want their kid to succeed, that want to have some measure of control over their children's education, who can articulate this argument in a way that other people understand and can support, we will not win it. Virginia is not Texas, it's not Mississippi. The battlefield is different, and you are fighting it on the front lines. We have to have somebody who's willing to stand and articulate these issues to the broader population in order to win elections here in 2020.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. We now move from education to energy policy, and we'll begin with Scott Parkinson. From the current administration, it seems like the major thrust is for everybody to abandon their internal combustion engine and buy an electric car. And yet, no one's power grid. Some estimates suggest that based on the current load and projected load, that grid could fail within a decade. What is your position specifically for energy production and distribution in the United States?
It's a great question. First of all, the reason that we have because of the energy crisis that Joe Biden has placed upon all of us through his regulatory regime. We know that the higher costs in transporting all the things that we use every single day are born because of Joe Biden's policies on energy. We've got to make sure that this war on fossil fuels becomes a war for fossil fuels and energy production. You think about this big push toward electric, right? This was a big thing in the Inflation Reduction Act that Tim Kaine supported. It's been a program that has cost potentially more than the Congressional Budget Office projected when that bill was before the United States Senate. And it's because more and more companies are taking up that tax credit. They want to take advantage of it because it gives them a business sense to get ahead of the future. But the bottom line is we need free market solutions when it comes to our energy sector, from nuclear, electric, wind, solar, and fossil fuels. I don't want to have distortions in the marketplace. I want the market to decide. I filled up gasoline this morning. It was $3.70. Maybe that doesn't sound like a lot to drive out into Southwest Virginia. You see all the time, people are filling up 1.5 gallons at a time for $5. Exactly. Because they need their car to get to the grocery store or the doctor's office or to visit their parents. It's these big kitchen table that I think everybody's happening. So what I want to do as U.S. Senator is roll back the regulatory regime of Joe Biden's policies. And we can do that with Donald Trump. You guys remember in 2017, we used the Congressional Review Act to roll back all sorts of regulations from Barack Obama. We can do that again.
Mr. Cow.
A bill I want to present is limiting regulations by these non-elected officials like Department of Energy, Department of Transportation. Since when do these unelected officials come in to you can't use incandescent light bulbs, ceiling fans, gas stoves? It needs to have a 3-year shelf life. After that, it has to either die on the vine or go to Congress as a law. You can't get taxed by unelected officials. We need a diversity in energy in this country. is very, very important, especially in Southwest, for their livelihood, but also not just for energy, but also you need something that burns as hot as coal to make steel. You also need hydroelectric. Right now, Tim Kaine signed on with Dominion Energy to put on 170 miles out there, 100 miles off the coast. Okay, but what if that doesn't work? What if some of these, turbines don't work? We need nuclear energy. The United States Navy has used nuclear power for 75 years safely. We have never gone supercritical, ever. Okay? The United States Navy, with Rickover's help, has really stayed within its lines. If you name the 3 big things that happen in the world for nuclear power incidents that happen, we're talking about 3 Mile Island. That was never a meltdown. We're talking about Chernobyl. That's just Russian stupidity, not putting in they're pushing the limits of that. If you talk about Fukushima, you don't put a backup diesel generator underwater. We have many ways to get nuclear energy safely in this country, and that's what we need to go for, because you can pay pennies on energy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cowell. Mr. Smith.
Apart from nuclear energy, the United States Navy, which is the best Navy in the entire world, the best military organization in the entire world, second to the Marine Corps. From nuclear energy, we cannot run our naval ships except that we remember what Donald Trump said. Drill, baby, drill. Drill, baby, drill. We cannot abandon fossil fuels. But you know what? We can't focus on fossil fuels because Joe Biden are busy giving $16.4 billion to Ukraine, keeping our children in the threat of more foreign wars. I say no, not just to foreign wars, but I say no to giving Ukraine anything. We have no dog in that fight. But where our interest should be. Our interest should be with Israel. American lives were at stake. American children were at stake. We need to get our country back. And if we do not do this, the time will come when all these new ideas, these new approaches will not run one turbine engine. We need to remember Donald Trump and what he has said. Let's make America great. Let's keep America great. On the issue of energy, drill, baby, drill.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. And Mr. Garcia?
I pledge to introduce an all-American energy. What we need. We need an energy plan that's all-American. That includes fossil fuels for today, because we need the energy today. It also takes into account nuclear energy for tomorrow, because we can't sacrifice today for the future, and we can't sacrifice the future for today. If you care about the environment, and many do around the Commonwealth of Virginia, nuclear energy is the only way. I've pledged a 48-state, lower state, interconnected nuclear energy grid that keeps us out of these foreign wars. It keeps us off of the reliance of Middle Eastern oil. It keeps us away from these Chinese minerals by slave labor. It employs millions of people for the next 3 generations. We can lead in America. We can lead in Virginia. Virginia has 6 different universities right now, today, that offer advanced degrees in nuclear technology. We have 2 nuclear sites here, Lake Anna and Surrey. We can lead in this area. We can put people back to work. We can build an economy that works for everybody, not just the connected in Washington, D.C. We can put our tax dollars to use for good people, for people who want to achieve the American dream, for that kids coming out of college got a future to look forward to, so that immigrants that have come here legally can learn a trade and can make a living in this nation, where we can afford rents again, where we can drive down the cost of these houses, that we can build an economy that works for all of us. Right now, we give all of our money to Washington, D.C., and all that money goes into their pockets. It goes into the pockets of the lobbyists. It goes into and the fundraisers that continuously drive our nation into the ground. It's time that we have leaders that come from us. That way we don't have them that come at us. I'm asking you to stand here and support me in this effort, because when we do, we're going to win Virginia. And then when we win Virginia, we're going to win the White House, and we're going to change this nation. And we do that on the back of an all-American energy plan.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. And final word on this topic with Mr. Emord.
So the Green New Deal is really a Trojan horse for socialism. There's absolutely no question about it. I don't believe in centralized government planning. I believe in free markets. I believe we have to have energy independence. I believe that we need to break down the regulatory barriers that this administration has put into place from day one when they eliminated the Keystone XL pipeline. So what do? What do we have to do? We have to incentivize jobbers to get back in. We have to eliminate the regulations that block the production of oil and natural gas. We have to get rid of the entire climate. I'm going to repeal the whole thing, and that's going to save us $1 trillion. That's going to save us $1 trillion in federal spending, and it's also going to liberate the market. You know, this whole idea of windmills and solar panels, absolutely asinine. You can't have reliable energy, it's intermittent. You can't have the ability to be warm in the winter, summertime, because it's just not going to work. You know, you'd have to take half the geographic territory of the United States just to duplicate the amount of energy that is being produced presently by fossil fuels, and yet they want to drive us into it, force us into it. And it's not an environmental benefit, it's an environmental hazard, because the solar panels actually pollute the environment, and because the windmills do too, and because you got to dispose of these broken windmills. And it's absolutely asinine. So it's no solution. We're going to get back to a free market energy. We're going to have energy independence in this country. And in addition to that, we're going to become an energy exporter. And if we want to deal with the Ukraine, the best answer to that is to replace the source of liquefied natural gas to Europe. And we can do that. We can become an energy exporter again. We can enrich this nation rather than impoverish it and have our people have $2 a gallon gas instead of $4 a gallon gas. And we can have economic prosperity, the likes of which we've never seen before. And President Trump is dead on the agenda, and he will bring it. But we in the Congress have to do so too. And you know what? You really have to understand regulation in order to be able to accomplish this. And you need to know how to dismantle that regulatory apparatus. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Emord. Now, two topics are because you could easily, in answering the first set of questions, bleed into the second question. We're going to approach international affairs, and then we're going to approach national security. National security, of course, will focus on our border protection and our military, where international affairs is more about our current overseas challenges. Ahead of time that you don't, step on your own message for the second question. Also, Mr. Pio, if you could, there's a lot loaded into this question. Maybe we should add a little bit more time.
2 minutes, 1 minute, 1 minute. 3 questions.
2 minutes, 1 minute, 1 minute. 2 minutes on the first one, 1 minute on. Oh, all right. That's 4 minutes.
3 round robins.
Oh, I see. All right, so we're going to go through. All right. Got it. Did you know that Senator Tim Kaine sits on the Foreign Relations Committee? Yeah. I didn't, and I'm paid to know these things. Because he's an invisible man, a complete non-entity. I'm thinking there's an empty chair at the committee there that belongs to Tim Kaine. Honestly, his greatest moment was helping Hillary lose. I mean, he finally delivered something. Don't you love having a moderator who isn't anywhere near moderate? All right, foreign relations. Since he sits on the committee, and we're going to start with you, Mr. Cao, you get 2 minutes for the first question. Looking at the Middle East, the current situation, not just the current situation between Israel and Hamas, but also the larger ramifications, Iran, Saudi Arabia, international affairs focused on the Middle East. Where do you stand right now on the conflicts there, and what solutions do you bring to the table?
No, that's great. Look, the Middle East, the first time in my adult life in 2023, we had peace in the Middle East through the Abraham Accord. We need to push forward on that. So when I was in NATO for a few years, we had what's called the NATO Response Force. We need to create something like that, the Gulf countries' councils, that allows them to have a rotational headquarters and rotational forces within those Gulf countries. Let the Muslims take care of other Muslims, because they have a vested interest as well, right, to keep peace there, because it's affecting their trade. all the way down to the Horn of Africa and all the southern tip and back up, and that's an extra 2 weeks of transit. So they want peace as well. Let them go in for the Gulf Coast countries. Let them be part of the Gulf Response Force. Let them police each other. And that's the best way for us to bring peace to the Middle East. Work on the back of the Abraham Accord. Look, I don't want us to get in endless wars. My son is going to graduate in a couple years. I do not want him to fight in endless wars like I did. Okay, the last person that wants to go to war is someone who's seen war. Okay, so we need to find every single means to bring peace to the Middle East. And the best way, like I said, through the Abraham Accord, keep pushing that, and then allowing for a Gulf Response Force that can go around and be the police of that area. Because it benefits them and it benefits us. We can withdraw forces as an advisory capacity and not put boots on the ground.
All right, Mr. Cow, thank you. And Mr. Smith.
I am not in favor of sending our children to pointless and endless foreign wars. Do you ever notice when Donald Trump was president, Hamas attacked Israel? Did you ever notice that after Obama gave millions and millions of dollars to Iran, Iran never attacked Israel while Donald Trump was president? Did you also notice there were no balloons flying over the sky when Donald Trump was president? Peace is gained through strength. America must be strong. We cannot appear weak on the international scene. Otherwise, our enemies will not just attack us, they will attack our allies. But here's the problem that I have. As a Marine, not just as a Navy JAG, as a father, how do you attack innocent children? How do you kill innocent parents, mothers or fathers who happen to be in Israel because you had a problem with Israel many, many years ago, 100 years? This thing never ends. You know what my grandmother would do to me if my cousin and I were fighting and my cousin tried to say, oh, Chucky hit me last week. My grandma would spank him extra hard. Last week was last week. Israel is the only democracy in the region, and we have an obligation to support Israel because the only solution that the Palestinians want is the non-existence of Israel, period. And that is unacceptable. That will never happen. That will not happen, and I will follow Donald Trump's policies in the United States Senate as the best person who has ever engaged in foreign relations. Joe Biden, I mean, it's not just that Tim Kaine and Joe Biden too, not just that Tim Kaine is occupying an absent seat, he's occupying an absent brain.
All right. And let me jump in just because we were on what these questions are. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Well done. We do have two other foreign affairs questions. Those will each get a minute. One will focus on Eastern Europe and the other on the Pacific Rim. Just so, again, I don't want you to step on yourselves. This answer should just focus on the Middle East. Go ahead, Mr. Garcia.
Sure. Well, I've said from day one that Ukraine war. I said that back in February of 2023, and I was ridiculed by some. I spent 6 different deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan and the Middle East. I spent about 8 years in the special operations community in Europe. What the military knew before this was that Russia was weak, that it couldn't do the things that it threatened to do, and what Joe Biden has enabled is he's enabled Russia to figure out the kinks in their processes. What he's enabled Russia to develop a military-industrial complex. He's enabled Russia to become more wealthy through the sale of oil and natural gas to China and India. He's enabled stronger when he told us that the purpose was to degrade it. It's done the exact opposite. It's time that we have leaders in D.C. that understand these issues, that have experience in these issues, and then it can articulate solutions to these issues. That's what I'm standing up here for. And so I've made an announcement on I stood with Israel and its defense and of its nation. I reiterated that this past week when Iran attempted to strike Israel, that we need to support our best ally, the only functioning democracy in the Middle East. But they asked on October 12th of that there were no foreign troops boots on the ground. They didn't ask for American troops. And we shouldn't give them because they didn't want it. We also shouldn't be telling them what to do. They have responsibility over their nation. We have a responsibility over our nation. And right now we got a border that's a mess. And that's the biggest national security risk that we have currently. These things. There's always money. I'll finish with this. There's always money for everywhere else across the world. We can't be strong internationally unless we're strong domestically. When our seniors are being priced out of homes, when our veterans are sleeping on the streets, there's never any money. But there sure is anytime that Ukraine needs anything, anytime the military industrial complex folks needs anything, these contractors, it's time to reverse that.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Good question, Mr. Emord.
So Joe Biden and Tim Kaine are really two peas in a pod when it comes to this because, as was pointed out, Tim Kaine is on the Foreign Relations Committee. He had access to intelligence. He knew this administration that ignominious retreat that was happening, he knew it was going to happen. Never mentioned a single objection to the president. Never introduced any legislation to halt or slow down that retreat to protect civilians. That was the start of it. When the world saw this incredibly humiliating and embarrassing retreat from Afghanistan, they knew that this president was weak. They knew that this president there was a problem upstairs. And they also knew that this president could be pushed around. And so that started it. This never would have happened with Donald Trump. Donald Trump was resolute. Donald Trump was strong. Donald Trump was willing to use American force where necessary. Here's the point. Oh, I guess he's not around. Now, the point is this. We have got to stand by Israel. Israel is our defense against terrorism. It is in our own best national interests. An America First policy defends Israel. Why? Because Israel is right in the way of terrorism that would otherwise reach us. Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, they are all interested in killing every Christian and every Jew in the world. We must not tolerate this. We have to ensure that Israel is fully supported in order for it to defend its interests. And when it comes to attacks on, we've seen over 40 American bases be attacked, and there's been virtually an anemic response from this administration, frequently many, many weeks, if not months, after the events. This cannot happen. We need an immediate counter to every instance. If you put an American soldier's life in jeopardy, you must. If you are around the world and you don't respect this nation and you're willing to engage in all sorts of activities that threaten the lives and the ability of the American soldier to defend the American homeland, you are our enemy, and we must treat you as such. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Emord. And again, the question is specifically to the Middle East right now, Israel, Hamas, yes. There's more to come.
Well, listen, first of all, of course, Israel has every right to defend itself. What happened with the terrorist attack, I believe it was exactly 200 days ago today, on October 7th, completely unacceptable. And as U.S. Senator, I would stand very, very strongly and closely with Israel, our strongest ally in the Middle East. And you think about what happened 10 days ago when they sent about 300 unmanned drones and missiles at the Israelis. There was an international that came together and shot them down. Of course, the Iron Dome did its job too, but the United States and Saudi Arabia and Jordan and others in the region stepped up to protect Israel and make sure that we didn't have a dramatic escalation that would ultimately lead to World War III. That needs to be our priority as policymakers. What can we do to actually have peace in our world? I think peace through strength is a hell of a motto. And you know what? These guys are all right. Donald Trump made us safer, he made us more prosperous, and he brought peace. Nobody threatened him. You know, they didn't know what he was going to do when he met with Kim Jong-un. They didn't know how it was going to go when he talked to Putin. But he was the type of leader that we need right now. And instead, they're testing Joe Biden every single day. That is why Hamas pulled the string to do that attack on the 7th. It's because Joe Biden is at the Resolute desk. Think about in 2014 when Putin took Crimea. That was because of Barack Obama's weakness. This is a contagious thing that the Democrats have. They are incredibly weak when it comes to our foreign policy. I stand strongly with our allies, especially Israel. We need to make sure that they have the tools that they need to be successful in defending their homeland.
Thank you, Mr. Parkinson. All right, we move to Eastern Europe, still staying in the foreign relations realm. Last night in the United States Senate, they passed a bill. And Senate fashion these days, it was this, you remember when you used to eat Starburst? Did you eat Starburst? You know, did you ever have a kid on the bus who would take each and every one of them out of the wrapper and then make it into like this big mushy ball? Or was that just me? Right? And then eat the and it's like every flavor. That's what this bill is, right? So they couldn't just have a bill where they do you approve or disapprove of funding Ukraine. No. They lumped funding for Ukraine, funding for Israel so they could replenish the Iron Dome, funding for Taiwan to protect themselves, humanitarian aid for Gaza or Hamas to do with their humanitarian aid, and they threw TikTok in there. You gotta love it, the creativity here. So if you're in favor or against any one of those things, and I literally don't think I know one person who actually is in favor of all of those things, you had to vote yes or no on any of them. So if I could have you walk the lane with us, and we'll begin with you, Mr. Smith. Imagine a miracle fantasy world where last night's bill only funded the war effort in Ukraine. How would you have voted on that bill? And how would you vote on a future bill? Because Lord knows you will be asked to vote on the Ukraine war effort.
Well, first I want to correct Scott. Scott said, my good friend Scott, said these guys are right on Donald Trump. I'm sure he meant that Chuck Smith was right on Donald Trump. but listen, the $60 that the United States gave in 2023 amongst all the nations in the world, half of that money is divided just in 10 nations, 10 countries. Who do you think tops that list? $16.4 billion this country gave to Ukraine. Now, we also gave money to Israel. Israel is a distant second at $3.3 billion. And we had a reason for doing that. But why are we funding, as a part of our foreign policy, a war where ultimately, you saw what happened with Iran, right? We gave Iran a lot of money. I'm out of time. We gave Iran a lot of money, and they turned around and attacked the country. So my answer to the question is, no, I would have voted for line item voting, period. Line item voting, so we can begin to get our country back.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Garcia.
I just said earlier I was against the Ukraine funding from the very beginning, so I stand by that statement. I'm going to stand right next to the edge of this platform here because that's the way our country is right now. It's teetering on the edge. Teetering on the edge because of people in Washington, D.C., people that have lived here and worked here in D.C. for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. Many of the people behind me. These are the people that have enriched themselves off the back of this government, off the backs of working people. There's hundreds of billions of dollars anytime anybody in the world. We have money for wars, but we don't feed the poor. We can't help seniors stay in their homes. We can't get veterans off the streets. We can't close our borders, and we can't protect our kids in school. And the reason we can't do that is because when the American people need something, there's never any money. There's always a carve out for somebody else, but not for you. I'm tired of it, and most of the people that I come across Virginia are tired of it too. These are people that we have to beat, and to beat them, we got to be the exact opposite. And so I stand here the exact opposite from what you're going to see in Washington, D.C., and I ask you to stand with me.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Mr. Emord, funding war effort in Ukraine.
So we have a terribly weak president, and a president who has no control over the tens of billions of dollars that are going into the Ukraine. Look, we've got a crisis. We have a border crisis. We have enemies of the United States pouring through our border. We have terrorists pouring through our border. I was at the border, and I have to tell you that this is an absolute planned destruction of the United States. There's no question about it. MS-13, 18th Street gang members, Bloods, Crips pouring across the border, sex traffickers, drug traffickers. This is destroying our country. And that should be our priority until our own border, we ought not be spending any money to the Ukraine to secure its border. We come first. And when it comes to a conscientious and intelligent policy, Biden has none. How are we ever going to get out of there? So the solution to that problem is energy. Facing Russia as the primary source of natural gas to Europe through liquefied natural gas depots, Russia relies 97% of its income from sale of oil and gas to Europe. Let's replace them, let's enrich ourselves, and let's deplete their ability to finance the war in the Ukraine.
Thank you, Mr. Emord. Mr. Parkinson, funding for the Ukraine war effort.
I would have voted no. And you know what? The money that Ukraine got is more than our entire Marine Corps gets annually. We need to invest in our U.S. national security. We need to invest in Hampton Roads, our naval fleet, shipbuilding. That's what America First is about. And I think that those investments are a hell of a lot wiser for our own national security and foreign policy than engaging in a proxy war with Ukraine and Russia. Ukraine is not in NATO. And instead, there needs to be a coalition of our other allies and to stand up against Putin through strength. That happens through the Resolute Desk with the President, Donald J. Trump. It's just a fact. And so, you know, this other notion that some of us got rich off of working in government, my first job in the United States Senate, I made $22. It was a foot in the door. It gave me a great experience. I'm proud of the work I did for 3 U.S. senators. I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Mr. Parkinson. And Mr. Cow, Ukraine funding.
As someone who ran away from communism, I'll kill a commie every day and twice on Sunday. The problem is that no one can tell me what the desired end state is. What does victory look like? Look, one of my jobs in the Navy at the Pentagon was to balance the Navy's budget. And Vice Admiral Aucoin over there was the Navy's money guy. And he knows how, he taught us how to go through line by line to look at where the, and so when you go look at the budget for Ukraine, a lot of that is paying for their pension plans. So my mom is on Social Security, and you're telling me we can't pay for her Social Security, but we can pay for their Social Security. That doesn't jive with me. I will go line by line and cut every single thing out that doesn't have to do with protection. Right now, the bill the way it is, no thank you. We need to protect our country first and foremost.
Thank you, Mr. Cow. All right, and now our final 1-minute question on foreign affairs, and we now turn to the Pacific Rim. Our current foreign policy with regard to China is schizophrenic. I couldn't tell you what the Biden administration's position is on China. I have no idea what our policy is. I don't even know if Biden or Tim Kaine, for that matter, could even say whether China is a national security threat. Do you think, starting with you, Mr. Garcia, China is a national security threat? And if so, what should U.S. policy be toward China?
I do consider it a security threat. I believe that what we see on the national news is that Chinese nationals are coming through our southern border right now. How we fix this, though, goes back 30 years. We've had people in D.C. that have offshored and outsourced and incentivized jobs to go away from Americans and over into Asia. The growth of the American free enterprise system that grows here in America, and the minute that they're profitable, it incentivizes them to send money and jobs overseas. And it's hollowed out America. And now we're reliant on them. We're reliant on semiconductors in Taiwan. We got to reverse these things. It's going to take somebody who hasn't been in D.C. and wrote these legislations and these carve-outs for these big companies that take advantage of this system. It's time for change. We got to have a Republican Party that works for working people across Virginia. Somebody who can stand shoulder to shoulder with you, not rule over the top of you. That will stand up against these war profiteers who never, ever do anything for us. They enrich themselves. It's time for change, and I'm that change agent.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Mr. Emord, is China a national security threat, and what should our policy be?
China is an enemy of the United States. Yes. It's not a strategic competitor. It's an enemy of the United States. They've infiltrated our government. They've infiltrated every aspect of our lives, education, and they are destroying this country. And we've had over 40,000 military-age Chinese PLA members come through the southern border, and that's what we know about, according to the CBP chief in the San Diego sector. happened, it's triple that at least. This is a planned destruction of our country underway. And we have got to treat it like that. So what do we need to do? What we need to do is we have to have a vigorous FBI presence that ferrets out those who are engaged in espionage in the United States. We need a redundant system for our infrastructure, which they're going to go after. We need to understand critically that China is our enemy, and we need to treat them as an enemy of the United States, not as a strategic competitor.
Thank you, Mr. Emord. Mr. Parkinson.
Of course, China is a national security threat. About all the things that they do to cheat and steal. They manipulate their own currency. They send students here to steal our intellectual property through our university systems. And we know that they're spying all over us. We see about how the Chinese embassy in Washington, D.C. tries to infiltrate our government. You guys read the story about the other group that was in Roslyn. This is a real national security issue that we all need to confront. And so how do you actually confront China without leading to World War III? I think that's the end game goal that I'd like to see. Let's confront them so that they stop stealing, stop manipulating. I think that you do that through competitive. We've got to cut our own corporate tax rate. We've got to make sure that we deregulate our labor regulations, because right now they have a strategic advantage when it comes to the labor regulations in China. So that's the kind of things that we need to do to confront China from day one with a unified government from Donald Trump, Senate, and Republican House.
Thank you, Mr. Parkinson. Mr. Cow, China.
Let's start first with North Korea. I don't think you guys understand how close we were to war. We were at war in 2016. When I went to the Pentagon, I was counting every missile, every bomb, every torpedo for an attack. And somehow Donald Trump stopped all that. He went. Now, the problem with China right now is they're not afraid of us. As the first Vietnamese U.S. Senator who will be inaugurated on the 50th anniversary of the fall of Saigon, I will be able to help build relationship between us and Vietnam to forward deploy our ships there. Vietnam, the Philippines, Japan, Singapore, and South Korea, we will have that entire South China Sea and the pincer movement, and we will be able to monitor everything they do. We can react quickly. And the things that I'm putting in right now and the sensors we're putting in the South China Sea, they will not be able to compete against us. And that to fold under this new leadership with Donald Trump and me standing behind him.
Thank you, Mr. Cow. And Mr. Smith.
Yes, China's a national security threat. Giving money to Sri Lanka, giving money to the Solomon Islands, giving money to Panama, flying balloons, that should have been the last straw. Flying flags in Michigan, Chinese flags on United States property in Michigan. As United States Senator, all that goes away. What we need to do is treat China as a national security threat and also make sure that we have a strong Donald Trump in the White House, because when Donald Trump was president, none of this mess occurred. And as your United States Senator, I will support the policies that Donald Trump pursues in the White House, 100%.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. We're kind of at our halfway point. So, you think we're getting a lot of information from these candidates? I have a quick question for you. How's the hair look? It's pretty good, right? You thought I was kidding. Seriously, bald, growing back. It's not perfect. It's better than bald. No offense, sir. Thank you. GrowYourHairback.com. Actually, shouldn't drag them into a political thing. I'm sorry. Forget that. Cut that with the Bill Clinton thing. Come on, you know Bill Clinton goes to silent auctions, buys jewelry for women. Hillary's like, jewelry? I know you don't, honey. So don't get caught over there. Just put the bid in and walk away. I want to go over and see Bill Clinton's name on the silent auction now. That would be awesome. All right. Back to serious things, gentlemen. I wanted you to have a break, too. National security. We've been dancing around it all day. I'm told by my intellectual and moral superiors, Jen Psaki and Rachel Maddow, that Virginians don't really care about border. What do we call West Virginia border? Of course, Virginians all know the border to worry about is the Potomac and the Maryland border. Tells me from my unrefined position, not sitting in Jen Psaki's seat, which is an image, that actually border security is pretty important to Virginians. It is actually a fundamental part of national security. So I would like you, starting Mr. Emord with you, to, in your eyes, tell us what you think for Virginia is to have the porous border that we have right now, and what would you do, what policies would you sponsor or spearhead to fix the border problem?
So as someone who represents two families whose children were sex trafficked in the Fairfax County schools, public schools, by individuals who are in gangs, who are illegal aliens in the gangs, I can tell you that it's a direct impact all across this state. All across this state, there's sex trafficking and drug trafficking. And in addition, we have 5 individuals on average dying every single day from fentanyl overdose in this state. And we are seeing criminal syndicates, of the criminal cartels coming all across the border. Let me just say this. I went to the border in October. I was with the CBP chief. I went into the thing they call the Human Processing Center. This is not a instance where people are just coming across because the border is open. They are being incentivized by this administration. Every gets the following things. They are signed up for welfare. They're signed up for food stamps. They're signed up for Medicaid. They are given cash. A family of 4 gets $3,000 in cash. They're given a cell phone at our expense, and it has a tracking device in it, which they all throw out, and they switch the cell phones. They're asked where they want to go in the United States based on where they want to go, and then they ship them over to the train station, airport, bus terminal, and there are non-governmental organizations fully funded by tax dollars, and they send them all across the United States. It's not that we have 9 million illegal aliens in the United States. We got 20 to 30 million. They're forming a massive underground economy, including in this state, undermining American jobs in this state as a result of the fact that they cannot get legal wages, so they're paid under the table. And this is destroying commerce in our state. We have got to get back to law and order, the rule of law. We got to shut down that border, and we have to ensure that the American people come first. And not that legal immigrants, people who came legally, are also not undermined, and also their rights are protected. But if you're here illegally, we have got to end that. We're going to have the biggest problem in the world if we don't.
Thank you, Mr. Emord. Mr. Parkinson, sir.
Ago that we read about the terrible story down in Campbell County, where a 32-year-old illegal alien from Venezuela sexually assaulted a 14-year-old girl in that community. My daughter will be 14 on May 31st. We've got to make sure that we recognize that there is on our southern border. And Tim Kaine says there's no invasion. He says it's a working class issue. It's not. This is a national security issue, like Larry said. It involves all of our communities. Here in Loudoun, we've all read about the fentanyl overdoses. It also happened in Arlington, where 4 kids were using drugs that were corrupted by fentanyl in the bathroom. They were 14 years old. How are they doing this? One of them died. We met with a faith leader in Prince William County in January, and he told the story about a 1-year-old baby that died a week before Christmas because with fentanyl exposure. This is not just about junkies. It's about the safety and security of all of our communities, and it is a crisis that is being borne by Joe Biden and Tim Kaine for their open border policies. You know, Donald Trump had it right with the Remain in Mexico policy. We need to end catch and release, and we need to have catch and deport. We need to deport these criminal aliens. Over 7 million illegal aliens have come just since Joe Biden became president. And about 30,000 January 1st are Chinese. Think about that for a national security problem as well. What do you think they're doing here? Again, they're trying to steal our intellectual property, they're spying on us, and they're right here in Virginia. As U.S. Senator, I'm going to fight for border security. I'm going to fight with Donald Trump to make sure that all of our are secure.
Thank you, Mr. Parkinson. Mr. Kauser.
My dad passed away 2 years ago. The last thing that was hanging over his bed was his naturalization certificate. That's how proud we were of being Americans. I'm telling you right now, the things that are coming across that border will blow your mind. down there by Team Trump in November with Joni Ernst, Chad Wolf, the last DHS secretary, Linda McMahon, and Morgan Ortagus. We went around and we talked to everybody there. The communities around there are getting ravaged. I mean, everything from they find illegal migrants, they're illegal aliens sleeping in a field, they have to destroy it. They have to destroy that field because they don't know what kind of diseases comes in. So, Larry, if you wonder why your vegan salads are going up, it's because of that. Look, these include military-age males from China, Yemen, Syria. You guys know geography. None of those countries in the southern border. They need to be kept out of this country. Look, I'm all about immigration, but it's got to be done legally. We need taller walls and wider gates. Here's the thing. That's not just a border wall down there. It's a border wall system, which includes fiber optic cables for EOIR sensors, for seismic sensors. So we are protecting our country. They have all the resources they need down there. The problem is Joe Biden refuses to put those things in place. As a legal immigrant to this country, I'm telling you right now, I'm going to stand on that wall and say, don't come to America if you're not willing to obey the American laws and embrace the American culture, because I did. You have to embrace this culture and you have to assimilate. That's what the American dream starts with. And I bled for this country because and I'm not going to allow for them to destroy our country anymore.
Thank you, Mr. Cow. I am making note of all of these gratuitous attacks, by the way. Mr. Smith.
So my good friend, Mr. Emord, has practiced law for 37 years. And I used to say that about 10 years ago. I am the only military lawyer on this stage. I'm the only immigration lawyer on this stage. I'm the only guy who's practiced military law, immigration law, and constitutional law on this stage. These are the tools that we're going to need for the problems at the border. All illegal and legal immigration must stop until we get our border fixed. We cannot have an open border and call ourselves a country. Donald Trump tackled this issue. And, you know, I thank my colleagues for going to the border recently. I went to the border in 2016. I supported Donald Trump since 2015. And you could see the porous holes through, you could see places where the fence was no longer there. We need to continue building Donald Trump's wall. If we want Virginia not to, if we want the killings like Lake and Riley, like others, many others, people get in trouble with immigration, then they're given a pat on the back, they go home, and then they decide to increase their numbers. No, it's not just 7 million more. We have 20 million illegal people, more than 20 million illegal people in this now. We have to get our country back. And we begin by deporting every single person who has not come through our front door. There was a time when we could say, let's continue the policies of before. But we have to do the same thing over and over and over again, expecting a different result. We need to tackle these issues, we need to handle these issues, and we need to help make America great again. As your United States Senator, I promise you, promise you, all illegal immigration will stop. And in this country will have to be deported, or they will have to show some justification that they have entered the United States legally, period.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. And Mr. Garcia.
This is an issue that's near and dear to my heart. I'm grateful that have made a trip down to the border. I grew up in South Texas. I grew up near the border. This is something that affects me and my family and has my entire life. I've listened to Republicans promise things about this border for 30 years, and it's only gotten worse. I remember when President Trump asked for a 1,300-mile border wall in 2017, and Republicans, by big money, backed by the Koch brothers, some of them from Club for Growth, voted against it, that worked against him. People like Jeff Flake, and people like Bob Corker, people like Paul Ryan. Thank you, ma'am. Yes, these are the type of Republicans that have been promising things for decades, and they haven't delivered anything. It's time that can speak to these issues with some authenticity and some authority. I've gone through this immigration system with my wife. My wife is a legal immigrant, originally from Latin America. We've traversed that crazy immigration system. That's a mess and expensive. I got experience in that, and I'm going to take that experience. I'm going to take this know-how, because I got to tell you, you know who hates this border more than anybody? Working class Hispanics across Virginia hate this border problem worse than anybody. And here's why. Because they know that the drugs that come across end up in their neighborhoods. They know that the criminals that come across sleep next door to them. They know that that are overcrowding their education system are in their children's schools. But we have to have a party and a candidate that can actually make this argument. Somebody who can speak with authenticity, somebody that they can relate to, somebody that inspires hope. What we see nationally is we see them walking away from the Democrats because the Democrats have left them culturally, but they're not walking toward. We got to have a party that's a big tent. We have to have a party of opportunity. We have to have a candidate that talks about solutions. I ask for your support in this. I believe I'm the only guy to do it.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. It should be noted, by the way, Senator Kaine was asked about the scenes at the border on March 26th. In fact, I just looked it up, about chaos at the southern border. He said, when Virginians see illegal aliens storming across the border, he said, you shouldn't think about national security, quoting now, the first thing you should think about is workforce. That's your senator. Also, in case you missed it, in that Ukraine funding bill that passed the Senate last, he just gave $300 million specifically for border control in Ukraine. It is actually line itemed in there. It is specifically for their border patrol to protect their border because apparently they're concerned about narcotics coming across that border. Something concerns about here. All right. You know, up until the miraculous Dobbs decision, it was actually kind of easy for a conservative Republican to be pro-life and have a political position because it all sort of narrowed down to, I oppose Roe v. Wade. And that was really it. Thank God, Roe v. Wade is gone. But it means it's a much more challenging conversation. And Republican, conservative, pro-life candidates can no longer just say, I'm against Roe v. Wade. Whether you are prepared or not, Tim Kaine, Joe Biden, and the Democrats will make this abortion. So I would like you to take these 2 minutes to let this group of voters know what your position is on abortion, whether you think there is a federal role for abortion law, because you might be faced with that as a senator, and as you're giving that answer, keeping in mind it's been a challenge for Republican candidates to articulate and communicate about this issue. And your opponent and the media will lie about you and will lie about your position. So with all of that in mind, I believe it is time. We start with Mr. Parkinson, am I right? Yes. Go ahead, Mr. Parkinson.
So I'm a pro-life conservative. The miracle of life is a just amazing thing. I was there when my first daughter was born. I was there when my second daughter was born. I was there when my third daughter was born. And I was there when my first son was born too. And it really was an amazing experience. Each one was unique. But the reality is that Tim Kaine is the one that's actually the extremist. His position is no restrictions on abortion. He has the same position as Governor Northam, which is abortion after birth. I think that that's the extreme and disgusting position in front. Republicans need to go on offense. Too often we've been on defense. And you know what? When I go on offense, I'm going to talk about a federal role that's actually defunding Planned Parenthood.
All right, Mr. Parkinson, thank you. Mr. Cow, you're up.
I'm pro-life. I'm not going to be hide behind. We have 5 kids. I was there for half of their births, and because I was deployed, and most of their conception. And I say that because we
Look at it before.
No, I say that because our children is adopted. Oh. I don't understand why we're not pushing more adoption, streamlining adoption. Instead of looking at killing babies, there's many families out there that would yearn to have a child in their life. Why are we not pushing adoption more? That's what I want to help out right now. Look, Virginia has the most liberal abortion policies in the world. I mean, up to the moment of birth. And unfortunately, the Supreme Court said that's a states' rights decision. So I would not do anything federally, but I want to push for adoption.
Thank you, Mr. Cow.
So I was also there at the conception.
Wait, at Hung's conception? I'm sorry. I said I wouldn't get in the way.
No, I love it. I love it. I mean, I got the joke of my own. We have to have consistency. What really boggles me all the time is the Republicans say one thing on the stage here during the campaign, get elected, the very next day do something completely different. Let me ask you, how does Planned Parenthood pass in the budget of Virginia every fail? Even during the years when Republicans hold the governor's mansion, they hold lieutenant governor's office, and they hold both houses of the General Assembly. How does that happen? Somebody is not voting the way they should. I am pro-life. I know abortion is now a state issue, but if it comes across my desk, I am pro-life. Exceptions. One of the problems that we face as Republicans, we create these exceptions. Oh, but for this, oh, but for that. Pro-life, no exceptions. No funding for abortion, period, in the United States Senate on the federal level. That's my position, and it does not change.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Garcia, you're up.
Friends, I'm pro-life for the whole life, from the very beginning to the very end. I also have marched for life for numerous years in Washington and Richmond. I can tell you, I've been saying for years and years it wasn't a federal issue, it was a states' rights issue. And when the Dobbs decision came down, it would be disingenuous. I would be a hypocrite if I told you I'm going to try to take it back to the federal level, because I don't believe it. I believe it's settled. But I am pro-life, and I would tell you here in Virginia that's not an easy stance to be. But we can be pro-life at the federal level. We can increase maternity care and access to our expected moms. We can, thank you. We can increase pro-life pregnancy centers. We can increase pregnancy education for those women that want to know about the life. We can increase adoption services. We can increase the child tax credit for those women who are living on the fringes, who don't think they have the means to bring life into this country. We can be a pro-life party, not just a pro-birth party. This is what separates me from my opponents, is I'm willing to articulate these issues in a way that's compassionate and for the mom. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Mr. Emord, sir.
Yes, so Dobbs got it right. The Founding Fathers never intended for abortion to be a part of the federal landscape. They did not include it within the Constitution, either as a power that was specifically delegated or as a right under the Bill of Rights. Issue, therefore, and they understood it as such. And that's the way it should be. If you want to change that, you have to use an amendment, Article 5. Now, on the state level, I'm pro-life, no question about it. And what I would advocate is this. We've lost the state house and the state senate. We have to solve this problem. What we really need to do is get rid of this political football. Choice between abortion and raising a child your entire life, if you don't want that. There's adoption, and we need to make adoption ubiquitous. We need to break down the regulatory barriers to adoption, and we need to give women fully informed consent. You know, they don't do that. They don't tell women that 65% of them will have psychological to the abortion that they have for the rest of their lives. They don't tell women that abortion is not risk-free, that you can have sterility as a result of abortion. We need fully informed consent. We need to get rid of this politicization of it. We need to make adoption ubiquitous, and we need to care truly for women and for children.
Thank you, Mr. Emord. I was skeptical of the 1 minute on abortion, but they pulled it out. They're good. These guys are good. Let's do it again. 1 minute on the national debt. Yeah, that should be fine. You do have to speak in sound bites when you're running for office, so this is a challenge. The national debt is horrific. It's affecting inflation. It's the main reason for inflation. How would you address the broken budget process that perpetuates this debt, where we're not actually going to committee, we're not actually voting on budgets on a department by department basis? We omnibus monsters to vote on, and it just keeps the problem going. We begin with Mr. Cow.
Okay, I spent many nights in the bullpen sleeping underneath my bed, underneath my desk, because we were balancing that budget. You stay in there until it's done. I don't understand how we're allowed to let these guys go on vacation, come back with 2 weeks haven't done in 14 years. We need 2-year budgets because it's hurting businesses, it's hurting industry, and we can't innovate that way because when you appropriate the money at the 6 months part, 6 months mark, and then you give them hits because they can't execute on time, it hurts industry and we can't move forward. We need to balance that budget. We need to keep it below $1 trillion, every year so that we can actually grow our way out of the debt.
Thank you, Mr. Cow. Mr. Smith.
So we all know that the national debt is more than $1 trillion. In fact, when the gave us this country, up until 2000 something, it was less than $1 trillion. But we have gone to almost $3 trillion in what, 20 some years. We have to reconcile our national debt. We continue to have a policy where our national debt is just exploding and exploding. You know why it's exploding? Because we're creating foreign wars and funding foreign wars and having people illegally coming to the country, filling up our hospitals, our schools. We're paying for all of these things. We cannot pay for everything. We have to have a policy where we do what mothers and fathers do every April 15th, reconcile their debt, reconcile their bills, and file their taxes. The government should not be allowed to continue raising the national debt where we require families to balance their
Smith. Mr. Garcia, the debt and the budget process, how they relate.
Sure. The only people that want a 2-year appropriation cycle are war profiteers and the people in D.C. who don't want to vote on it. So I would tell you that's a bad idea, first and foremost. If we care about our debt, we need a workforce for America. If you care about the future, we got to have people system and into jobs so they have the opportunity to lift themselves up. If you care about Social Security, and I do, we need people paying into the system. We got to have a jobs market here in America that focuses on us. We got to stop spending all this money, I'll say it again, all this money all around the world. It's lining the pockets of all the big wigs in D.C. and overseas and everybody in between. It's guy to institute some working class issues to bring jobs and opportunity back to our local communities. If we do that, we can grow ourselves out of it. We can stop spending around the rest of the world. We can start focusing on where we should be, which is in our communities, in our families, right here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We can build jobs and opportunity, and we give hope college that they're going to be able to afford to live in this nation. They're going to be able to afford the places here in Northern Virginia that are currently unaffordable. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Mr. Emord, sir.
We have a $35 trillion national debt. Within the next 7 years, it's going to be $60 trillion. We're no longer going to be the reserve currency for the world, be replaced by the Chinese renminbi. This is going to happen unless we dramatically reduce the size and scope of the government and cut government spending. Number one, we need to get rid of the climate change agenda. Absolutely. Not only that, that saves us $1 trillion a year. Not only that, we have a $2.5 trillion deficit, and it's going to increase. We have got to get control of this, which means that we're going to have to cut government spending substantially. And we're also going to have to grow the economy. How do we grow the economy? Well, we need to substantially reduce the corporate tax. We need to substantially reduce the individual income tax. In fact, I'm in favor of not having an income tax until you get $200,000 a year. Then a flat tax straight up. And that's going to grow this economy like you would never believe. If we want economic opportunity, if we want to be able to build the economy and grow it, which we have to do to solve this debt problem, we are going to have sound and intelligent tax policy.
Thank you, Mr. Emord. And Mr. Parkinson.
Think about a year ago when the debt limit was expired and Congress got together and the House conservatives, with their small majority, they passed a bill called Limit, Save, Grow. And what the bill would have done is it would have provided for a debt limit increase if we cut spending for these pro-growth reforms. That was a consensus bill that went over the United States Senate, and Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer and Tim Kaine sat on their hands and did nothing. And Kevin McCarthy grew frustrated. He broke his promise with those House conservatives, and he passed a bill with Biden called the Fiscal Act. It was nothing but fiscally responsible, right? All that bill did was suspend the debt limit through January 2025. I've got the experience working on these issues at the highest levels in our Congress and with the administration. We know that from January through about May, Treasury known as extraordinary measures, where they suspend payments for certain assets. And what they're going to do is they're going to have a big spending deal in next June. We've got to have somebody with the experience that knows how to confront those issues.
Thank you, Mr. Parkinson. The term deep state is tossed around quite a bit these days, and whether you believe that bloated regulatory state with unelected individuals wielding power to spend money that they shouldn't and inflict pain on American citizens that they have no business, and rewriting laws that they never voted on, or if you think it stretches into the Justice Department and to use their incredible powers against American citizens for political purposes, what would you do, regardless of how you, or all of the above, by the way, if you think of the deep state, what would you do to rein in their power, to expose it, and to end what they've been doing in this country, Mr. Smith?
I've always been in favor of not creating more new laws. We don't need new laws. We simply need to enforce the laws we've got. We've got a number of people who are making decisions for us and about us, and they've never been elected. For example, the central banking system, the Fed. We need to get rid of the Fed. But look, this is the balancing act. This is the balancing act. Between 0.25% of a percent, the Federal Reserve, which cannot go bankrupt, cannot have a savings, is determining for us what our interest rates are going to be based on the economy. I mean, they're floating between inflation and they're floating between the nation going into a deficit. This has got to stop. If number one, I think we should get rid of the Fed because the Fed, I think, but the Fed is the banker's bank. And so whenever the Fed raises interest rates, the banks do what? They raise interest rates, right? Hurting the American people.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Garcia, the deep state, what would you do?
The deep state, friends, we're supposed to have a government that comes from us. But right now, we got a government that comes at us. DOJ and the FBI and the CDC and the IRS and the EPA and the DEA, FDA, all these federal agencies that are ruling roughshod over us. That's why it's going to take somebody who's not been a part of this system for the last 30 years in order to fight against it. If they could fight against it, they would have done it by now if they're that big of a patriot. Okay, it's time to start getting people out of D.C. and get new blood in there. People who don't want to be a career bureaucrat and who don't want to use the system, the corporate system, or the political system as a stepping stone in and around Washington, D.C. We see it. We see them coming in when they're young staff, a job on a lobbying firm, and then they come into our federal agencies with a political agenda. And then when we're done with that, they're trying to run for office and rule over you. This is the cycle we've seen every time, every year, generation after generation. It's time to do something different. It's time for the people across Virginia, across America, to start standing up and vote in one of their own, one that's not afraid, that's going to stand up righteously against that cabal of the deep state.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. And Mr. Emord, deep state.
So I've been fighting the deep state, the administrative state, my entire professional career. I have the record for defeating the Food and Drug Administration on constitutional grounds, which is 8 times in federal court. I know the administrative state intimately. Congressman Ron Paul has endorsed my candidacy in no small measure because I wrote for him a bill called the Congressional Responsibility and Accountability Act. This act would solve much of this problem. Let me tell you quickly what it does. No regulation that is proposed by an agency can have any force or effect unless passed into law by Congress. This reestablishes Article 1, Section 1 of the Constitution. Secondarily, all existing regulation would be sunsetted within 3 years unless passed into law by Congress. Once again, substantially reducing the power and scope of the administrative state. We have to defang it. When it comes to the abuse, the two-tiered system of justice that is abusing now, this system has to come to an end. What do? We don't fire specific individuals. We'll leave that to the president. But what we will do is we will eliminate entire departments in the FBI and the Department of Justice and reformulate them so that they are no longer a part of this cabal that is politicized.
And Mr. Parkinson.
When I declared on April 3rd, the first thing that I did was I signed the U.S. Term Limits Pledge because I think that we need to have term limits for members of Congress. But they should also extend to the deep state and the unelected bureaucrats. We know that they're running rogue agencies right now. I can use the powers of the purse to defund the enforcement actions that each of those runaway agencies are committing. Donald Trump also promulgated an executive action for Schedule F employees, basically where he reclassified thousands of federal workers so that they could be fired. One of the first things he did when he got elected was he changed it back. So you've got to work with Donald Trump to make sure that we've got that executive order back in place, and you've got to use the power of the purse. You've got to make sure that through our appropriations process, when there's a two-tiered justice system at the Department of Justice, that you confront it. That's what a United States Senator needs.
Thank you, Mr. Parkinson. And Mr. Cow.
I spent 4 years on the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force, and all those agents and I were so angry at what's going on in the 7th floor of the Hoover Building. All these unelected officials, like the guys, you know, from the Attorney General to the FBI. I mean, talk about deep state. FISA, that's the power for the deep state. We should never, ever collect on American citizens. That needs to be repealed right away. And we need to hold all those SESs and appointed in the FBI, the DOJ, hold them accountable and hold them in front of our hearings and fire them right now.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Cow. All right. And we got a fun final question here. It's multiple choice. And you have 1 minute. 30 seconds. Wow. Actually, you know what? It's not going to be that bad, I promise. This is a slam dunk. If you could wave a magic wand on your first day in the U.S. Senate and enact only one of the following three options, which one would it be? And we're going to begin with you, Mr. Garcia. Here are your choices. Number 1, prohibit members of Congress from insider trading. Number 2, mandatory term limits. Or number 3, mandatory mental health checks for members of Congress. We don't have all the above. I wish we did.
Mandatory term limits. Mandatory term limits because we just can't be ruled by the same people over and over for generations. We don't have a nobility in this nation, nor should we ever have it. But you couldn't tell that if you looked at Washington, D.C. What goes on is that these guys that from a candidate's perspective, is that these guys that have been raising money for 10, 12, 30 years put us at a disadvantage, and it takes away the power of the people in the vote because they buy up all the airwaves. I'm a grassroots blue-collar candidate, and I'm running a grassroots message. We defeat them by
Mr. Emord, your choices are prohibit members of Congress from trading, mandatory term limits, or the mental health checks.
Mandatory term limits without question. I've signed the U.S. term limits pledge. I believe that we don't need career politicians. They've done more damage to this country than just about anything. We need to get rid of the people like Pelosi and Schumer. And Tim Kaine is a career politician, perfect example of that. We need to send Tim Kaine packing. And boy, oh boy, wouldn't it be nice if we had the term limits in place in order to do that. So yes, U.S. term limits.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Parkinson, do you need the choices again? You got them?
You know, call me crazy, but two. And if I had to pick one, I'm going to say that it's related to the investments and insider trading because that's actual corruption. It's not corruption just to say that you want to be in office forever, which I totally disagree with. Right? I'm the youngest candidate on the stage today. I've got Eddie beat by about 8 months or so. So I'll be 42 later this summer. But the reality is you've got these people like Nancy Pelosi. Michael McCall just made a huge trade on Meta, which is Facebook stock. This crap is unacceptable. People should not be getting rich off the insider trading in Congress.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Cow?
About term limits, but you bring up a good point. If we stop them from insider trading, they won't stay there forever to get rich. So maybe that's the way. Look, I'm 52 years old, and I don't want to die in Congress. I want to do 1 or 2 terms. I'm done, and then you can elect these other guys. Then they're young enough to come on behind me. So yeah, let's keep them from doing insider trading. That way, they won't stay in forever.
All right, and Mr. Smith.
Insider trading, insider trading. I know term limits is a big issue, but money is the root of all evil. Money has politicians, not just to stay in office, but to become rich. I mean, look at Nikki Haley. Look at the former Speaker of the House. These people have become rich, and they're emboldened, they're incentivized to stay there and pass it on after they leave. Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, all the Hunter Biden was not elected official. And Joe Biden should be in jail as well. We need to rein in corruption, and corruption begins with people staying for money.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. And yes, I mean, obviously you can't have mandatory mental health checks for everyone in Congress. No one left. What would you do? To the end of our debate, we now want each candidate to have a final word for 2 minutes. 2 minutes. 2 minutes to sort of make your final case and seal the deal. Starting with you, Mr. Emord.
Well, I've been spending my entire career fighting for your rights, and that's what I think is the in this race. We have got a situation where our government has turned against us, where our rights are at stake, where we are looking at a government that has incentivized illegal aliens to come into our country, that is spending money to causing massive inflation, and that is not interested in protecting our rights at all. You never hear someone in the Biden administration saying one word about those who have been assaulted by illegal aliens, who suffered rape or incest as a result of the ridiculous sexualization of the youth. They don't care about us. We have got to change that. And what we need quintessentially is someone experience, the background, who's actually written the legislation, who's actually fought for your rights, who understands deeply the administrative state, which has got to be dismantled if we're going to save our country and save our state even. We have got to have someone who understands intimately the Constitution. It hangs by a thread. I've spent my whole life Constitution of the United States, the intellectual origins of it. If we're going to evaluate, as senators uniquely do, prospective justices of the Supreme Court, we need someone who will stand up for the original construction of the Constitution, who understands it intimately and can ask the right questions and ensure the right people are qualified. This is a big job. It's a solved by a narrow set of background, and it's also one that requires integrity. We need integrity matters. Making sure that you do not misrepresent who you are so that you can accurately represent who you are to the American people and that they can trust you. This is critical. We also have to have the ability to understand what the Founding Fathers intended for this government. And last but not least, if we are going to save our nation, we have to remember fundamentally the declamation of power of George Washington. George Washington, when he was had left the Revolutionary War, declaimed power, and he went into retirement. That's because he understood that a republic depends upon people not interested in the centralization of power. We've got to get back to that original understanding.
Thank you, Mr. Emord. And Mr. Parkinson.
For a long time, being the guy behind the guy, working in Congress, working in 3 U.S. Senate offices, being a senior staffer in the House of Representatives, helping Ron DeSantis win the gubernatorial race in 2018 by 30,000 votes. And then COVID hit. And I watched them trample all over our God-given constitutional rights. I saw the economy. I saw people terrified. There was a political fear that swept America. And we needed political courage. So after the 2022 elections, my wife and I started to pray about this. Why? We had a guy named Glenn Youngkin that came out of nowhere and won in 2021. He paved for us to defeat Tim Kaine. And so we started praying about whether or not it'd be a good idea for us to run. I talked to about 1,000 people over 6 weeks. Some of them would say, Scott, you got 4 little kids. Why don't you wait? You're young. Just wait 10 more years. And they'd say, but you can't actually win. Can you actually defeat Tim Kaine? He was Hillary's running mate. He was chairman at the Democratic National Committee. He's been in office for 30 years. But I think that's part of why we can win. I've got the faith that we can win. And I'm often reminded of my verse. It's Matthew 17:20. And it says, if you've got faith the size of a mustard seed, you can tell a mountain to move from here to there. I've been planting mustard seeds all over Virginia for the last year. I'm asking for your support. I'm Scott Parkinson. My website Parkinson.com. God bless you all. Let's win this race. Let's get fired up and defeat Tim Kaine and Joe Biden in 2024. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Parkinson. Mr. Cow.
Look, I think we're all pissed off right now. We're pretty angry right now. Happy warrior, I'm not your guy. You want to get someone that's going to go in there and fight for you, that's going to work every single day for you, I'm the guy. You know my resume. Engineer, physicist. I served in the United States Navy. I worked with law enforcement. I've done all these other things. But also, something very special in 2022. We moved that needle so far over. It would be for naught if we didn't keep moving. We have $3.5 million worth of name ID we built in, and we fought for Northern Virginia. And now we're going to bring the rest of Virginia out, and we're going to win this fight. Look, some people say, oh, well, you know who lost a congressional race but won their Senate race? Barack Obama. Let that say, no, I hate my name being put on the same line with him, but it's doable. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm telling you right now, we can do this. I'm willing to fight for you. We know what's ahead of us. My wife and I know every single day. It started on July 18th when I declared, because Tim Kaine has been coming after me hard every single day because he knows he's going to face me. He doesn't know how to contrast himself with me on that stage. You know, remember back in the 80s, we had all these painkillers, and right? Nuprin. You guys remember what Nuprin's motto was? Little, yellow, different, better. My name's Hunk. Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Hunk Cow, and I will be your next U.S. Senator in Commonwealth of Virginia.
Mr. Smith.
So in 1970, my grandmother was in the yard. I came home from high school and I said, Mama, I just joined the military. And you should see her eyes went bloodshot red. She cried her heart out there on her knees. She finally got up. She grabbed me real hard. Chucky, whatever you do, stay on that damn ship. Stay on that damn ship. I said, Mama, I didn't join the Navy. I joined the Marine Corps. And she bursted out with a scream. Listen, where we fail, integrity. I heard someone say authenticity. I can't believe it. Where we fail, integrity, experience. We also fail on loyalty, right? So if you're looking for someone, if you're looking for courage, ask yourself, where in the world is an 0311 grunt ground pounder who enlisted in the Marine Corps in 1970 at the height of the Vietnam War when nearly everyone else was running away? Mothers and fathers falling on their knees. Country, please don't draft my sons. Grown men, some of the Republican Party, some of the Democratic Party, some independents were dodging the draft, making excuses. I didn't dodge the draft. I didn't make any excuses. And somebody please tell Tim Kaine when my country needed me most, when they were looking for a few good men, I didn't go hide and write a book. I went to Parris Island, South Carolina. If you're looking for loyalty, our type of loyalty, real loyalty, how about the former chairman of the largest Republican Party in the Commonwealth of Virginia? And when I was chairman, we held every one of the 7 conservative seats. If you're looking for integrity, how about a Navy JAG commander retired after 26 years of service? If you're looking for experience, how about someone at a time when the Constitution has been turned on its head? How about someone who's practiced law longer than anybody on this stage? In fact, longer than anyone in the 400-year history of Virginia, 45 years, who can say that we need to get our country back. I'm telling you, I'm running on of all known history, standing up for America, standing up for Virginia, and the only candidate standing, saying, praying, and believing, God bless America, lift every voice and sing, my country, 'tis of thee, the battle hymn of the Republic. Thank you all so much. God bless you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Friends, elections are about the future. You just heard everybody up here. Believe them when they tell you they've worked in Washington for 30 years. Believe them when they tell you they work for big money, they don't live here in Virginia. Believe them when they say they're connected to D.C. and they got endorsements. Believe me when I tell you I served my nation. That I jumped out of airplanes for 16 years, I graduated Ranger School, and to come back after 22 years and to see working people in this country, in the most prosperous nation in the world, further behind economically than when I left, something's got to change. And it's got to change right now in 2024. It's going to take somebody that can stand next to Tim Kaine and be the Tim Kaine. So while he's old and tired, I got to be young and energetic. While he has all the problems that we've seen over the past 22 years, I got to talk about the solutions to those problems. While he represents a Virginia in 1994, I got to represent what Virginia looks like in 2024. We got to be able to stage next to Tim Kaine and articulate these issues in a way that gains support. We have to evangelize to a new community, to grow our tent, to be the great opportunity party that the GOP can be. And we can't do that if we're plagued with scandals, if we're in the pockets of people who don't live here. It's important today that we have a on stage in 2024 and make this argument that can evangelize in the way that we know evangelizing is supposed to happen. We got to go places that like the book of Acts says, that these apostles, they went to places that were hostile to their message, places that were ignorant of their message, and they stood on the truth. They did it with open hearts and they gave witness to what they know to be true. If we want to evangelize, if we want to build this party, what Scripture says is that when they said these things, many were added to their numbers. If we want many to be added to our numbers, we have to go places Republicans haven't gone. We have to evangelize. We got to stand on the truth and how to live in this country, how to build this nation once again that prospers for all Americans, not just Washington, D.C. I believe I'm that candidate. I ask you to stand with me in 2024, and God bless you all.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Well, I mean, what a time to be a Virginia Republican. And I want to be an inspirational and high-minded, intellectual, cordial, collegial, respectful evening. I don't know where I went wrong. I apologize. I tried my best. I was hoping for a mud fight. But, gentlemen, if you wouldn't mind just together. Ladies and gentlemen of the Loudoun County Republican Party, the next senator from the Commonwealth of Virginia stands before you.